Hi, I'm Jennifer, and I'm about to get started on a new project for myself. I'm making these, the Misa pant by Style Sew Me. The Misa pant is an elastic waist pant with a slight paper bag top, and before I'm able to pick the size that is going to best fit me the way I want the pants to fit me, I need to do a little measuring. And before I can measure the pattern pieces accurately, I'm gonna need to draw on the seam lines, because this pattern, like so many others, already come with seam allowance added. So if you're not sure how to add seam lines to your sewing pattern pieces, stick around and I'm gonna show you 3 different ways to do just that. So the first way to add seam allowance to your sewing pattern pieces is to use one of these. These are called clear gridded design rulers, and these design rulers are structured in 1/8 inch increments. So each one of these little tiny squares equals 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. For the Misa pants sewing pattern, the seam allowance is 1/2 an inch. So that means that my stitching line or my seam line is going to be 1/2 an inch in from the cut line. Now these 2 pieces of paper here are just for the demonstration. These are not from the pattern itself. Now using the gridded design ruler, we want to find the distance from the edge of the ruler in the amount of your seam allowance. The seam allowance on the Misa pants are 1/2 an inch. So that's this thick line here. So I'm going to take the 1/2 inch line and I'm going to line it up on the cut line of the pattern. I want the edge of the ruler to be inside the pattern piece itself. So if you see here, this is the 1/2 inch line here, and I want the 1/2 inch line to be on the cut line. So matching up here with the ruler inside the pattern piece. And this is a straight line, so all we have to do is match up the straight line of the ruler with the straight line of the pattern piece and trace along the edge of the ruler to get our stitching line or seam line. And this distance is now 1/2 an inch. Super easy with the straight line. What happens if you have a curved line? So here we have a curved line and we're going to do the same thing. But before we start, I'm gonna pick a point on the ruler to focus on. So let's say I'm gonna pick this 6 inch mark. So this is just indicating that it's 6 inches away from this edge of the ruler. But I'm just gonna keep in mind this 6 inch place. And on the 6 inch line, I'm going to find that 1/2 an inch from this side of the ruler. And I'm gonna take that intersection and I'm going to place it down on a curved section of my cut line on the pattern piece. From there, I'm going to make a little dashed line right underneath the 6. And then I'm gonna move the ruler down and do the same thing. And I'm just gonna repeat and repeat. And you will notice now that this stitching line follows the curve of the cut line. And this distance, again, is 1/2 an inch. The second tool you can use is one of these, a seam gauge. The seam gauge is nice because it has this little toggle that you can place on the measurement you need. So I need 1/2 an inch. I'm going to place the toggle on the 1/2 inch mark. And then I'm going to apply the same technique that I used before with the straight ruler, making these dashed lines for both curved lines and straight lines as well. Let's do the curved first. So in on the pattern piece, I'm going to place my seam gauge. So I have the red notch here on the cut line, and then I am going to trace a little dashed line at the edge of my seam gauge here. And I'm going to keep doing that around these curves. And so now this distance is 1/2 inch. And on the straight line, it would be the same thing. And so this distance, again, 1/2 inch. Now the last tool you can use is a tape measure. So for the tape measure, you will do the same thing as the seam gauge. You will find your mark. So we're at 1/2 inch, and 1/2 inch goes on the cut line of the sewing pattern piece. And then you can use the edge to mark your seam line. Now, depending on how accurately these bumpers are put on the end of your measuring tape, you might be a little bit off. So usually what I would prefer to do is go in. And so I would take the 1.5 inch mark and mark from 1.5 to 1. So in that case, I would find 1.5, and then I would mark next to the 1 inch instead of marking on the bottom of there. And you'll see that that comes out to be the same as the gridded ruler. And then the same thing would apply for the curved piece. 1.5, mark a little dash at the 1. 1.5, mark a little dash at the 1. And so here we have our stitching lines or our seam lines drawn into our sewing pattern piece. If you're not sure what to do with these seam lines now, or you're wondering how you can measure your sewing pattern pieces so that you can more accurately predict how a sewing pattern might fit you, I hope you will look up my online course, Sewing Patterns Mastered. In Sewing Patterns Mastered, I teach you how to read sewing patterns, how to measure pattern pieces, how to understand measurement charts, how to predict whether or not your final garment is going to match the idea you have of it in your head before you start. If you are a fashion sewist who isn't quite getting the results you want from your sewing patterns, I hope you'll read more about my online class, because it might be the thing you need to sew clothes you will truly love. Thank you so much for watching, and now I have to run. I have some pants to sew. See you later. Bye.